The restaurant lights were dim, the kind that made everything look softer than it really was. People sat at tables, laughing quietly, glasses clinking, forks tapping against porcelain plates. Near the large window where the city lights blinked outside, a man sat alone. His name was Ethan, and even though he was one of the richest men in the city, right now he looked like any other man waiting too long for someone who might not come. He kept glancing at the door. Every time it opened, his eyes lifted with a flicker of hope, then dropped again when it wasn't her. The waiter came by for the third time, asking gently if he wanted to order or wait. Ethan gave a polite smile and said he'd wait a few more minutes. He'd never been on a blind date before. His assistant had convinced him it was time to meet someone real, someone who didn't care about his money or name. He'd laughed when she said that, but somehow curiosity had made him agree. Now, sitting alone with a half-full glass of water, he wondered if it was a mistake. He looked around at the couples, people leaning close, sharing stories, smiling easily. It had been a long time since he'd been part of something like that. Most of his dinners were business meetings where conversation meant negotiation and laughter meant strategy. This waiting for someone to just talk to felt strangely new. 10 minutes passed, then 15. He checked his watch again, his jaw tightening. He wasn't used to waiting. In his world, things moved when he said so, but tonight time seemed to mock him. The waiter passed again, pretending not to notice the empty chair. Ethan sighed and reached for his phone. He was about to text his assistant to call the whole thing off when a soft little voice broke through the hum of the restaurant. "Excuse me," it said, small and careful, like it didn't want to interrupt anyone. Ethan looked up, surprised. A tiny girl stood near his table, maybe 5 years old, holding a stuffed rabbit by one ear. Her brown curls bounced slightly as she shifted from one foot to another. "Mommy's sorry she's late," the girl said. "She's parking the car." Ethan blinked, unsure what to say. The restaurant noise faded for a moment. The little girl smiled politely, her big eyes bright and full of honesty. "She said you shouldn't go yet," she added quickly. "She said it's her fault, not yours." A smile tugged at his lips before he realized it. "Oh," he said softly. "Well, thank you for telling me." She tilted her head. "Are you the man Mommy's supposed to meet?" He nodded, still amused. "I think I might be." "Okay." The girl climbed into the chair across from him as if she'd done it 1,000 times before. "She'll be right back. She said not to let you leave." Ethan couldn't help but laugh quietly. "Don't worry. I'll stay." She looked around the restaurant, her little eyes darting from one fancy dish to another. "This place is pretty," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "But they don't have crayons," Ethan smiled. "No, I don't think they do." "That's silly," she said, swinging her feet under the table. "Every good place should have crayons." "Maybe you're right," he said, pretending to think seriously about it. "I'll have to tell them that." She grinned proudly. "I could draw something for them. Like flowers." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "That would definitely make this place better." She seemed pleased by that. "I'm Lily," she said suddenly. "What's your name?" "Ethan." "That's a grown-up name," she said thoughtfully. "You don't look mean, though." "Mommy said she hopes you're nice." That made him laugh again. "I'll try my best to be." Before he could say more, the restaurant door opened and a woman rushed in, her cheeks flushed from the cold night air. She looked around until her eyes landed on their table and relief washed over her face. "Lily," she said, hurrying over. "Sweetheart, what did I tell you about talking to strangers?" Lily smiled innocently. "He's not a stranger. He's your date." Ethan stood, a smile still on his face. "She was just keeping me company." The woman looked a little embarrassed. "I'm so sorry," she said quickly. "The traffic was terrible, and then I couldn't find parking anywhere. I didn't think she'd actually come in." "It's all right," Ethan said, his tone gentle. "I'm just glad you made it." She adjusted her coat and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, still looking flustered. "I wasn't sure if I should bring her. My babysitter canceled last minute, and I didn't want to cancel again." "It's fine," he said again. "Really?" The waiter appeared with a smile, setting down menus. The woman thanked him, then sat down, pulling Lily onto her lap. Up close, Ethan could see she wasn't dressed like most of the women he met at social events. She wore a simple blue dress, neat but unpretentious, her makeup minimal. There was something real about her, something that didn't try too hard. "I'm Claire," she said after a moment. "Thank you for waiting." "Of course," he said, taking a sip of water. "I'm Ethan." And your daughter already introduced herself. Claire smiled, glancing at Lily, who was now playing with her napkin. She tends to do that. She's more social than I am. That's not a bad thing, Ethan said. She made the waiting much more interesting. Claire chuckled softly, relaxing a little. I guess that's good then. Dinner started with a bit of awkwardness. Claire apologized again for bringing her daughter, but Ethan assured her it wasn't a problem. Lily, on the other hand, had no trouble filling the silence. She asked Ethan what he did for work, why his watch was so shiny, and if he had a dog. He answered every question with a smile, finding himself more entertained by her curiosity than he expected. When the food arrived, Lily clapped her hands. It's so pretty, she said, staring at the tiny plate of pasta in front of her. But it's not spaghetti, Ethan laughed. It's the fancy kind. But maybe we can find real spaghetti next time, she gasped. You mean it? Sure, he said. If your mom says it's okay. Claire shook her head, smiling. You shouldn't make promises like that. She'll hold you to it. I believe her, Ethan said, smiling back. As they ate, the conversation started to flow more naturally. Ethan asked Claire about her work, and she told him she was a teacher at a local elementary school. She spoke about her students with such warmth that it made Ethan forget about business for once. She talked about how she loved watching kids learn, how every day felt unpredictable but rewarding. In turn, she asked about his company, though she admitted she didn't know much about the business world. Ethan told her bits and pieces, how he'd started with nothing, how work had consumed most of his life. Claire listened quietly, without trying to impress or flatter him, which was new to him. He noticed her hands as she spoke, calloused slightly, probably from work and life, not soft like the hands he usually shook at fundraisers. Lily interrupted every few minutes, showing him how her bunny could dance or making up stories about her imaginary friend. At one point, she leaned close and whispered, Mommy likes you. Claire nearly choked on her drink, while Ethan struggled not to laugh. When dinner ended, Lily had fallen asleep against her mother's shoulder, one hand still clutching her bunny. The soft light made Claire's face look peaceful, even though he could tell she was exhausted. She looked up and smiled shyly. Thank you for being patient with us tonight. Ethan shook his head. Don't thank me. I enjoyed it. You don't have to say that. I'm not, he said softly. It's been a long time since I laughed this much. They walked out together into the cool night air. The city was quiet except for the hum of traffic and the soft glow of streetlights. Ethan offered to walk them to their car, and Claire didn't refuse. They moved slowly, careful not to wake the sleeping child. When they reached her old sedan, she turned to him with a grateful smile. I'm sorry again for the chaos, she said. This wasn't how I pictured a first meeting. Maybe it's better this way, he said. It felt real. She looked at him for a moment, her eyes searching his face, then smiled. Good night, Ethan, he nodded. Good night, Claire. Before she could open the car door, Lily stirred in her sleep and mumbled, Bye, Ethan, Mommy smiled tonight. Claire froze, her face softening. She looked at him almost shyly. Good night, she said again, quieter this time, before getting into the car. Ethan stood there as their car pulled away, the tail lights fading into the distance. He didn't move for a long moment. The street felt empty again, the night air cold against his face. When he finally went home, his penthouse was silent, the kind of silence that used to comfort him. But now it felt hollow. He poured himself a glass of water, stood by the window, and stared at the glittering skyline. Normally, he would have turned on his laptop or called someone from work, but tonight he didn't. He just stood there, replaying that little voice in his head, the way she said, Mommy's sorry she's late. Somehow that small, innocent sentence had started something he couldn't quite name. He had no idea then that this chance encounter would soon turn his entire world upside down. The next morning, Ethan woke up earlier than usual. He had a meeting at 9, but his mind wasn't on business for once. Instead, it kept drifting back to last night. The small restaurant, the nervous woman, and the little girl who had walked straight into his evening like she belonged there. He found himself smiling, which was rare for him so early in the day. He wasn't sure why, but something about them had left a mark. He poured himself a cup of coffee and stood by the tall windows of his penthouse. The city was already awake, cars moving. Below, people rushing to work, life moving as it always did. But for the first time, he felt disconnected from all of it. He thought about Claire and how she'd apologized over and over, how she'd looked embarrassed walking into that fancy place with her daughter. And yet she'd carried herself with quiet strength like she didn't want pity. Ethan admired that. He'd met so many people who pretended to be confident, who built their confidence on status and wealth. But Claire's calmness came from somewhere deeper. It wasn't loud, it wasn't forced, it was just real. He picked up his phone and scrolled through his contacts, stopping at an unsaved number. She had sent a text last night to let him know she got home safely. He read it again, even though it was simple. "Thank you for waiting tonight. I appreciate it." Lily fell asleep halfway home. It wasn't flirtatious, not even slightly romantic, but it felt genuine. For someone who received thousands of emails a week, that small message carried more warmth than all of them combined. He started typing, then erased it, typed again, then stopped. What was he even supposed to say? He didn't want to sound too eager or make her uncomfortable. After a long pause, he finally sent something simple. "I hope you and Lily got some rest. It was nice meeting both of you." Then he placed the phone down and told himself not to overthink it, but he did, all day. At the office, his assistant noticed he was distracted. During the morning meeting, he drifted off halfway through a presentation. When his business partner asked for his input, Ethan blinked, pretending he'd heard everything. Normally, he was sharp, quick, impossible to catch off guard, but that morning he was somewhere else entirely. His assistant, knowing him too well, smiled as she handed him another document. "So," she said carefully, "how did the dinner go?" He cleared his throat. "It was fine." "Fine?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "You've never looked this distracted after a fine date." He gave a faint smile. "She brought her daughter. The babysitter canceled." "Oh." The assistant paused, surprised. "And you stayed?" "Yes." She tilted her head slightly, studying him. "You liked her." "I didn't say that," he replied too quickly. "You didn't have to," she said with a grin before walking away. By late afternoon, Ethan finally got a reply to his message. It was short but warm. "Lily says thank you for the dinner. She still thinks about the spaghetti you promised." He laughed quietly at that. Then he typed back, "I'll have to keep my promise then." And that was how it started. For the next few days, they exchanged short messages. Nothing heavy, just light, easy conversation. She told him about her students, how one had drawn a picture of her with purple hair, because she said teachers were superheroes. He told her about a trip he took years ago to the mountains, how quiet it was compared to city life. Sometimes she'd take a few hours to reply because of work, and sometimes he'd respond late because of meetings. But somehow the rhythm felt natural. Then, one Friday afternoon, he asked if she wanted to meet again. She hesitated before replying. "I'd like that," she said, "but I might have to bring Lily again." "I'm sorry. I know it's not ideal." He smiled at the screen. "I think I can handle that." That Sunday, they met at a small cafe near her school. It wasn't a fancy place, just a cozy corner cafe that smelled like fresh bread and cinnamon. Ethan arrived first, dressed simply this time, trying not to stand out. When Claire walked in, holding Lily's hand, he felt something shift again. Lily ran up to him immediately, smiling like they were old friends. "You came," she said, almost shouting. "Of course," he said. "I made a promise." They found a corner table near the window. Lily got her hot chocolate while Ethan and Claire ordered coffee. The three of them talked easily, almost as if they'd known each other for a long time. Lily told him about her favorite cartoons, about how she wanted to be a teacher who also flies airplanes. Claire blushed when Lily mentioned that Ethan looked like the prince from one of her storybooks. At one point, Lily ran off to look at the cupcakes by the counter, leaving the two of them alone. Claire looked at Ethan with a small, nervous smile. "I'm really sorry if this feels awkward," she said. "I don't usually do this." "Do what?" he asked. "Go out with people. Especially with, well, billionaires," he laughed softly. "You don't have to remind me what I am." "I'm aware of it," she smiled, her eyes kind but guarded. "It's not that. I just don't want you to think I'm—" She stopped herself. "It's complicated," he nodded. "Life usually is." For a moment they sat in silence, just looking out the window. The city outside was busy, but inside the cafe it felt peaceful. When Lily came back with cupcake frosting on her cheeks, Ethan couldn't help but laugh again. Claire reached for a napkin, shaking her head affectionately. She's impossible, she said. She's wonderful, he said quietly. Claire looked at him, a little caught off guard. There was a warmth in his voice that made her heart flutter just slightly, but she quickly looked away, pretending to focus on cleaning Lily's face. They talked for hours. It didn't feel forced or heavy. It just flowed. By the time they left, the sun had started to set. Ethan walked them to their car again, and Lily hugged him before getting in. Next time, she said, you have to come to the park with us. He smiled. It's a deal. As they drove away, Claire looked at him through the rearview mirror. For the first time in a long time, she found herself smiling without even realizing it. Over the next few weeks, their paths crossed more often. Ethan visited the school one afternoon with a donation for new books, but he didn't announce who he was. He quietly handed the envelope to the principal and left before Claire saw him. He didn't do it for praise. He just wanted to help. They met again at the park, as promised. Lily was running around chasing pigeons while Ethan and Claire sat on a bench watching. The conversation was slower this time, but comfortable. Do you ever wish things were simpler? Claire asked suddenly. He looked at her, curious. Simpler how? Like, not about money or status or pressure, just life, people. Ethan thought for a long time before answering. All the time, he said. But I spent so long chasing success that I forgot what simple even feels like. She looked at him quietly, sensing the honesty in his tone. Maybe this is it, she said softly. Moments like this, he turned to look at her. Maybe you're right. That moment felt like something changed. They didn't say anything more for a while. The sound of Lily's laughter filled the air, and it was enough, but things weren't easy. Not for either of them. When word spread in Ethan's company that he was seeing someone, it became gossip. His business partners whispered that she wasn't from his circle. One evening, after a long meeting, one of them said quietly, "You have to be careful, Ethan. People talk. You don't want your name attached to someone who doesn't belong in our world." Ethan said nothing, but something inside him stirred. Later that night, he called Claire. She was reading to Lily when she answered. He could hear the little girl's giggles in the background. "Sorry," Claire whispered. "Story time," he smiled. "I can call back." "No, it's fine. Did she like the cupcakes I sent?" "She loved them," Claire said warmly. "You really didn't have to do that." "I wanted to." She paused for a moment. "You don't have to keep doing nice things for us, Ethan. Just spending time with us is enough." He leaned back in his chair, her words hitting him deeper than she realized. No one had said something like that to him in years. Most people expected something from him, money, favors, connections, but she didn't want anything. "I like spending time with you," he said quietly. There was a long pause before she replied, "I like it too." After that night, they grew closer. Ethan began visiting more often, sometimes joining them for dinner, sometimes helping Lily with her little school projects. He became part of their routine without forcing it. He found joy in small things. Making breakfast, fixing a broken lamp, helping Lily with her spelling. It was a side of life he'd never experienced before, and he loved it more than he could admit. One evening, after Lily had gone to bed, they sat on the couch, a movie playing softly in the background. Claire turned to him and said, "You don't have to keep doing this. You have a whole different world waiting for you." He looked at her for a long time. "Maybe this is the world I was looking for," he said. She didn't respond right away, but her eyes softened. He didn't know if what they had was love yet, but it was real. It was slow, gentle, and genuine, and as he left that night, Lily peeked out from her room and whispered, "Good night, Ethan." He smiled. "Good night, kiddo." As he walked out into the quiet street, the night air felt different. Lighter somehow. For the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. He didn't know where this would lead, but for once, he wasn't afraid to find out. The following weeks felt different for Ethan. His days were still filled with board meetings, business calls, and dinner invitations from people who wanted to discuss deals more than friendships, but something inside him had changed. He caught himself smiling at random moments, like when he passed a toy store and saw a stuffed bunny that looked exactly like Lily's, or when he heard a song playing in a cafe that reminded him of that dinner night with Claire. He wasn't used to feeling this kind of warmth in his life. For years, he had convinced himself that emotions were distractions. He had built his empire by being precise, logical, and distant. But now all he could think about was a woman who smiled shyly and a little girl who made him laugh so hard his stomach hurt. At first he tried to brush it off. He told himself it was just a pleasant evening and nothing more. But every time he tried to focus on work, his mind wandered back to them. He found himself checking his phone, hoping for a message that never came. He even opened his calendar and saw the date of that dinner circled in his mind, like a memory that refused to fade. Finally, after nearly 2 weeks, he sent her a message. It was short and polite, just asking if she and Lily were doing well. Hours passed before she replied. She said she was sorry for not writing sooner. Work had been busy and she was trying to manage a lot. She thanked him again for dinner and said Lily still talked about him. Reading that made Ethan smile in a way he hadn't smiled in years. That small message turned into a few more. Soon they were texting every day, not about grand things, but about small human moments. She told him about the funny things her students did, about Lily refusing to eat vegetables, and about the old car that kept breaking down. Ethan told her about his dog that passed years ago, about how his housekeeper kept scolding him for skipping breakfast, and how empty his big apartment sometimes felt. One day he asked if she wanted to meet for coffee. She hesitated for a while, but eventually agreed. They met at a quiet cafe near the school where she taught. She came wearing a soft gray sweater and a simple scarf, her hair tied loosely, while Lily bounced next to her holding a coloring book. The moment Ethan saw them, it felt like the world had slowed down. Lily ran to him and waved, calling his name with the kind of joy that melted every wall he had ever built around himself. She climbed onto the seat next to him, showing him her drawings before he could even say hello. Claire laughed softly, apologizing for her daughter's excitement. Ethan told her not to apologize. He enjoyed it. And it was true. Sitting with them, drinking coffee and listening to Lily chatter about her drawings, felt more natural than any formal dinner he had attended in years. They talked about everything that day, their childhoods, their fears, their dreams. Claire told him how she became a teacher because she loved helping children who came from broken homes, just like she once did. Ethan listened quietly, realizing how different her world was from his. He told her a little about his past too, about how he lost his parents in a car accident when he was young, and how he had buried himself in work ever since. It was the first time he had spoken about it in years. Claire didn't say much, but her eyes showed empathy, not pity. That silent understanding between them said more than words ever could. By the time they finished their coffee, hours had passed. Lily had fallen asleep in her mother's lap. Ethan offered to walk them to their car again. When they reached it, Claire thanked him for the company and said she had a nice time. He nodded, trying not to show how much that meant to him. Before they left, Lily woke up and hugged him tight around the neck, whispering that she hoped he would come to the park with them next time. That simple sentence echoed in his mind long after they drove away. In the days that followed, they started seeing each other more often. Sometimes for lunch, sometimes for walks in the park where Lily would run around feeding ducks while Ethan and Claire sat on a bench talking. He learned that Claire was stronger than she looked. She had been raising Lily alone since her husband left years ago. There were days she barely got by, but she never complained. She lived with quiet dignity, always putting her daughter first. Ethan admired that deeply. He began doing small things for them, not out of pity but out of genuine care. Once, when her car broke down again, he sent a mechanic to fix it before she could even ask for help. Another time, he left a small box at her doorstep. Inside was a new set of crayons and a note for Lily that said, "For my favorite artist." Claire tried to refuse at first, saying she didn't want charity, but Ethan assured her that it was just friendship. Over time, she began to trust him more, but not everyone in Ethan's circle was happy about the change. His business partner, Oliver, noticed how distracted he'd become. During meetings, Ethan would glance at his phone or smile to himself. One afternoon, Oliver walked into his office and said he'd heard rumors that Ethan was spending time with a schoolteacher and her child. Ethan didn't deny it. He simply said yes and that it was personal. Oliver gave a tight smile and said he hoped Ethan remembered that the company's image mattered. He hinted that people might not understand why a billionaire would be involved with someone from a completely different world. Ethan dismissed the comment, but it lingered in his mind. For the first time, He began to feel the quiet pressure of people's expectations. A week later, his assistant brought up the topic too, suggesting that if he wanted to maintain his reputation, he should be careful about who he was seen with. Ethan realized then how shallow the world he lived in could be. The same people who praised him for his success were now judging him for simply caring about someone who wasn't part of their social circle. Despite that, he didn't stop seeing Claire. In fact, his bond with her grew stronger. One evening he joined them at a local school fair. It was noisy and crowded, filled with laughter and the smell of popcorn. Claire was running a booth where she sold handmade bookmarks to raise money for new library books. Lily was face-painting butterflies on kids' cheeks. Ethan had never seen such simple happiness before. He helped her at the booth, clumsy but eager, laughing as children teased him for his poor painting skills. People there didn't care about who he was or what company he owned. They just saw him as a man helping a teacher and her daughter. For the first time in years, he felt like he belonged somewhere real. As the night went on, the fair light shimmered above them. Claire stood beside him, smiling at the crowd. Ethan glanced at her and realized he hadn't felt this alive in a long time. He wasn't thinking about profits, deadlines, or the next big deal. He was thinking about how her laughter made him forget the weight of his world. Later that night, when he walked them to their car again, he told her how much he enjoyed the evening. She smiled and said she was glad he came. Lily, half asleep, whispered that she wanted him to come again next year. Driving home, Ethan made a quiet promise to himself. He would do everything to protect what he had found. It wasn't just about love. It was about finally discovering something real in a world that often felt fake, but the challenges were only beginning. A few days later, photos of him at the school fair started appearing online. Someone had recognized him, and soon gossip sites began talking. The headlines were cruel. Billionaire spotted with single mother. Mystery woman captures CEO's attention. When Ethan arrived at the office the next day, whispers followed him. Oliver made a sarcastic comment about his new charity project. Ethan ignored it, but his anger simmered beneath the surface. That evening, Claire called him, her voice shaking. She had seen the articles. Parents at the school had started whispering, and even her principal asked questions. She said she didn't want Lily to become part of a scandal. Ethan apologized, saying he never meant for any of this to happen. He wanted to fix it somehow, but Claire told him maybe it was best if they took a step back, at least until things settled down. That night was the first in weeks that he felt the old emptiness return. His apartment felt larger and colder than ever. He walked through the halls, remembering Lily's laughter, remembering the warmth in Claire's eyes, and he realized how much they had changed him. He couldn't sleep. All night he kept replaying her words in his head. Taking a step back wasn't what he wanted, but maybe she was right. Maybe his world was too heavy for hers, yet deep down he knew this wasn't the end. He had faced harder battles in business, and this time the fight wasn't for power or money. It was for something much more precious, for the chance to hold on to the only people who had ever made him feel truly human again. As dawn broke, Ethan stood by his window, watching the city wake up. Somewhere out there, Claire and Lily were probably getting ready for another ordinary day. He didn't know how, but he promised himself he'd find a way to make things right. He wasn't going to let judgment or gossip destroy something so rare, because for the first time in his life, he wasn't chasing success. He was chasing meaning, and it had the face of a woman who taught for love and a little girl who once walked up to him and said, "Mommy's sorry she's late." Days passed and Ethan tried to focus on work, but every corner of his mind led back to Claire and Lily. His office desk was covered in papers, but he couldn't read a single line. Every time his phone buzzed, he hoped it was her, but it never was. Even the sound of children laughing outside his office window reminded him of Lily's voice. He thought about calling Claire again, but he knew she needed space. Still, the silence between them felt heavier with each day. The nights were worse, long, quiet, and empty. He missed the way Claire listened without judgment, and how Lily made him laugh at things that once seemed too small to notice. One evening, while sitting alone in his penthouse, Ethan looked at the city lights stretching across the skyline. He had built his entire life around control and perfection, but love, he realized, didn't follow rules or logic. It was messy, unpredictable, and painfully real. For the first time in years, he didn't want control. He just wanted them back. But life wasn't that simple. The next morning, his assistant informed him that a major investor had pulled out from a project. The reason? The ongoing gossip about his personal life. The story had spread faster than he expected, and people in his circle were questioning his choices. Ethan didn't care about his reputation, but he cared about how it affected Claire. He knew she must be hearing the whispers too. He wanted to protect her, but he didn't know how. That weekend, he decided to do something he rarely did. He drove out of the city. He didn't tell anyone where he was going. He just followed the road that led to the small neighborhood where Claire lived. When he parked outside her building, he didn't go in. He sat in his car watching from a distance as she walked out with Lily, holding her hand, heading to the grocery store. They looked peaceful, laughing together as they crossed the street. For a moment, he thought about stepping out, but then he stopped himself. He realized that being near her might only bring more trouble into her life. So he stayed where he was, silently watching, wishing he could be part of that quiet happiness. A few days later, an invitation arrived for a charity gala, an annual event his company hosted to raise funds for children's hospitals. It was one of the biggest social gatherings of the year, filled with cameras, donors, and media coverage. Normally, he went alone or with a business guest, but this time, he thought of Claire. He hesitated for a long time before finally sending her a message, inviting her and Lily to the event. He made sure to mention it was for a children's cause, hoping that would make her comfortable. He didn't expect her to say yes, but to his surprise, she replied that she would think about it. 2 days later, she confirmed they would come. Ethan couldn't explain it, but just reading that message made his chest feel lighter. When the evening of the gala arrived, the ballroom was decorated with golden lights and white roses. The air was filled with the soft sound of a live orchestra and the chatter of people dressed in their finest clothes. Ethan arrived early, greeting guests, shaking hands, but his mind was somewhere else. Every time the door opened, he glanced over, waiting. Finally, just as the music changed, he saw her. Claire walked in, wearing a simple navy blue dress that moved gently as she walked. Her hair was down, and she wore almost no makeup, yet she drew attention without trying. Beside her was Lily, in a small white dress with a bow in her hair, clutching a stuffed bunny. The crowd turned to look, not in a rude way, but in quiet curiosity. Ethan moved through the room, ignoring the stares, and went straight to them. Lily's face lit up when she saw him, and she ran forward to hug his legs. Claire smiled politely, a bit nervous. She whispered that she almost didn't come, but Lily insisted. Ethan smiled back and thanked her for being there. He offered them seats near the front, where the noise was softer. Throughout the evening, Ethan stayed close to them, explaining things to Lily, introducing Claire to a few people he trusted. For a while, it felt like everything was perfect. They laughed, shared stories, and when the auction started, Ethan bid on a set of children's books, not to impress anyone, but because he knew Lily loved reading, but perfection never lasts long. As the night went on, Ethan noticed a few guests whispering and glancing their way. One woman at a nearby table made a comment loud enough for Claire to hear. Something about interesting company for a billionaire. Claire froze, pretending she didn't hear it, but Ethan saw the hurt in her eyes. He clenched his fists, but forced himself to stay calm. He leaned closer to her and whispered that she didn't need to worry about them. But she smiled faintly and said she was fine, even though her voice trembled slightly. A few minutes later, another guest, one of Ethan's business partners, came over, pretending to joke but clearly meaning otherwise. He said something about Ethan's charitable spirit extending beyond business, with a laugh that made Ethan's jaw tighten. Before Ethan could respond, Claire excused herself, saying she needed to check on Lily. She walked away quickly, her shoulders tense. Ethan stood there for a moment, then followed her outside. He found her sitting on a bench near the garden, holding Lily in her lap. The little girl was half asleep, her head resting on her mother's shoulder. Claire looked up as he approached. She tried to smile, but her eyes were glassy. She said quietly that she didn't belong there. She felt out of place, like she had stepped into a world that wasn't made for people like her. Ethan told her that wasn't true, that she belonged anywhere she wanted to be. But she shook her head. She said she could handle people talking about her, but she couldn't let Lily grow up hearing whispers about her mother being the woman who chased a billionaire. He tried to reassure her, saying he didn't care what anyone thought. She said she knew he didn't, but people would still talk and she couldn't stop them. Her voice broke a little when she said that Lily deserved peace, not gossip. Ethan's chest ached. He wanted to tell her he'd protect them both, that he'd make it all disappear. But he knew some things couldn't be fixed with money. He stood there watching as she gently rocked Lily, her face lit by the soft glow of the garden lights. After a long silence, Claire said, maybe it was best if they kept their distance for now. She said it softly, but each word hit him like a blow. Ethan asked if that was what she really wanted. She didn't answer right away. Then she said sometimes love isn't enough when two worlds are built so differently. She looked at him with tears in her eyes and said she didn't want to lose herself trying to fit into his world. Ethan wanted to speak, but no words came. He just nodded slowly, even though everything inside him screamed not to let her go. They stood there for a moment, the hum of distant music behind them, the city lights flickering in the distance and the faint sound of Lily breathing softly in her sleep. Then Claire whispered goodbye and walked away, carrying her daughter in her arms. Ethan stood frozen long after they left. He wanted to chase her, to tell her she was wrong, that he didn't care about what anyone said. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the exhaustion in her voice, or maybe it was the realization that love sometimes meant letting someone walk away if it meant giving them peace. When he finally went back inside, the room felt colder. The lights seemed too bright, the music too loud. People came up to him talking, smiling, but he couldn't hear a word. He left early that night. Driving home, he passed through quiet streets, the city lights blurring as he tried to keep his mind from breaking apart. He reached his penthouse and went straight to the balcony, standing in the cold wind, trying to process everything. He looked at his reflection in the glass door, a man who had everything but somehow lost the only thing that truly mattered. He realized he could buy anything in the world except the one thing that made him feel alive, the warmth of that small family who had given him hope. That night, he didn't sleep. He sat by the window watching the dawn slowly creep in. He thought about Lily's laughter, about the way she called his name when she saw him, and about the way Claire smiled when she talked about her students. He missed them more than he thought possible. In the days that followed, Ethan avoided social events and ignored the media. He buried himself in work, trying to escape the emptiness that followed him everywhere, but nothing helped. The office felt like a cage, and even his success started to feel meaningless. One evening, while walking through the city, he passed by the park where he once met them. He stopped and looked at the bench they used to sit on. For a long time, he stood there in silence. He thought about how, just a few weeks ago, life had felt so full. Now it felt like someone had turned off all the color. He sat down on that same bench and watched the children playing in the distance. Somewhere deep inside, he knew this wasn't over. He couldn't explain it, but something told him that life wasn't done with their story yet. Weeks went by after that night at the gala, and for Ethan, each day felt longer than the last. The city that once energized him now felt dull and lifeless. He went to work, sat through meetings, signed contracts, and made decisions worth millions, but none of it meant anything anymore. Everywhere he looked, something reminded him of Claire and Lily. When he saw a mother holding her child's hand on the sidewalk, he thought of them. When he passed the small park near the cafe, he remembered the day they sat on the bench laughing about Lily's wild stories. Even the scent of coffee in the morning made him think of Claire's soft voice. He tried to convince himself to move on. He told himself it had only been a short time, that maybe he was just caught up in a moment. But the more he tried to forget, the more he realized he didn't want to. He didn't miss just the idea of them. He missed the feeling of being part of something real. One night, after finishing a long meeting, Ethan stayed alone in his office. The city lights glowed outside his window, reflecting off the glass table where he sat. He looked at the reflection of himself, a man who had everything the world could offer except what truly mattered. He picked up his phone and scrolled through his messages until he found Claire's name. He thought about calling her just to hear her voice, but his fingers stopped before pressing the button. He remembered her last words, how she said Lily deserved peace, how she felt she didn't belong in his world. He couldn't drag her into that chaos again. For a while he sat there in silence, then suddenly an idea came to him. Maybe he couldn't fix everything right away, but he could do something, and something good, something that might make her proud. The next morning, he called his foundation team and told them he wanted to start a new project. He didn't give details right away, but he said it would involve supporting local schools, teachers, and children from struggling families. When his team asked what inspired it, he simply said, "Someone who reminded me what kindness looks like." He spent weeks planning the project. He visited small schools across the city, not as a billionaire, but as a man trying to understand what teachers and children really needed. He met with principals, parents, and volunteers. Some recognized him, most didn't. He didn't care about recognition. He just wanted to make a difference. In every school he visited, he saw faces that reminded him of Lily. Bright, curious, full of hope. And in every teacher, he saw a bit of Claire, strong, patient, and quietly fighting for the children they cared for. As the weeks went on, he realized that this was the first time in years he had done something that truly made him happy. One afternoon, while visiting a school on the city's outskirts, he noticed a small classroom with peeling paint and broken desks. Inside, children were sitting on old chairs, listening to a teacher who spoke with such passion that the poor condition of the room didn't matter. After class ended, Ethan walked up to the teacher and introduced himself. She smiled and thanked him for visiting. Her warmth reminded him so much of Claire that for a moment he couldn't speak. He asked about the school's needs, and she told him they needed better supplies, new books, and a small playground for the children. Ethan promised to take care of it. And he did. A few weeks later, the school had new desks, bright walls, and a small playground that became the children's favorite spot. Seeing their joy filled something in Ethan's heart that had been empty for so long. But even with all the good he was doing, there was still one thing missing. He still thought about Claire every night. Then one afternoon, as he was reviewing some plans at his office, his assistant came in and said a teacher had requested to meet him personally about the new foundation project. Ethan agreed without asking for details. When the door opened, he looked up and froze. It was Claire. She stood there nervous but smiling softly. She said she had come to thank him. Her school had just received a donation from his foundation, new computers, books, and funding for a reading program. She hadn't known he was behind it until she saw his name on the letter. For a moment, neither of them spoke. There was so much left unsaid between them. Ethan finally stood up and said he was glad to see her. Claire nodded, her eyes warm but cautious. She said she didn't come expecting anything. She just wanted to thank him for helping so many children. Ethan told her it was because of her. She looked surprised. He said that after meeting her and Lily, he realized how powerful kindness could be. That night at the restaurant and every moment after had changed the way he saw the world. Claire listened quietly, her eyes glistening. She told him she had seen the news about his project and that what he was doing would change so many lives. For the first time in months, they laughed again, softly, like they used to. They talked for hours, catching up on small things. She told him about her students, about how Lily was learning to ride a bike and how they had adopted a small kitten. Ethan smiled and said he'd love to meet the kitten someday. Before she left, he asked if they could meet again. Maybe somewhere simple, no fancy restaurants, no cameras, just the three of them. Claire hesitated for a moment, then nodded slowly. The following weekend, they met at a quiet park near her neighborhood. It was the same park where they had once fed ducks together. Lily spotted him from a distance and ran toward him, shouting his name. She threw her arms around his neck and said she missed him. He hugged her gently, trying not to let his emotions show too much. Claire watched them, smiling softly. They spent the afternoon together, eating ice cream, watching children play, and walking by the lake. The air between them felt lighter, like time had softened the pain. Ethan didn't bring up the past. He just wanted to enjoy the moment. When they sat on the bench as the sun began to set, Claire said she had been afraid to see him again. She didn't want to fall back into something that would hurt later. But seeing him with Lily again made her realize that he had become a part of their lives in a way that couldn't be erased. Ethan told her he didn't expect anything from her. He just wanted to be there and in whatever way she would let him. He didn't care about the world's judgment anymore. She looked at him quietly for a moment, then said she believed him. From that day, they began seeing each other again, slowly, quietly, away from the noise of cameras and gossip. Ethan didn't flaunt it and Claire didn't hide it. They just lived moment by moment. Sometimes he helped her at school events. Sometimes she and Lily visited him on weekends, baking cookies in his kitchen or watching movies in the living room. Lily brought life back into his home. She painted pictures and hung them on his refrigerator. She made him laugh again. And Claire, with her calm presence, made him feel grounded in a way no success ever had. Months passed like that. One morning, Ethan woke up to find a small note taped to his door. It was from Lily. It said, "Thank you for making Mommy smile again." He held that note for a long time, realizing that those simple words were worth more than everything he owned. He knew then that he didn't want to spend another day without them. A week later, he went to Claire's school again. She was finishing her class when he arrived. The children ran out, waving goodbye, leaving her alone in the classroom. When she saw him, she smiled. He walked up to her, holding a small box and a bouquet of lilies, her daughter's favorite flower. He didn't kneel or make a grand gesture. He simply opened the box, revealing a delicate bracelet with 3 tiny charms, a heart, a book, and a small house. He said the heart was for love, the book for the lessons they'd both learned, and the house for the family he hoped to build with them, not made of walls and money, but of trust and warmth. Claire didn't speak for a moment. Tears welled in her eyes as she realized what he was really saying. He wasn't asking for perfection or promises, he was asking to belong. She reached out and took his hand, whispering that maybe it was time to stop running from what felt right. From that day on, Ethan, Claire, and Lily became inseparable. They didn't need headlines or approval. They found happiness in small moments, morning walks, shared laughter, bedtime stories. For Ethan, life had come full circle. The man who once sat alone at a fancy restaurant, waiting for someone who never showed up, now had everything he had ever wanted sitting right beside him. All because a little girl once walked up to him, clutching her bunny, and said, "Mommy, sorry she's late."